Okay. Excellent. And let's try the Facebook. Right. Okay, great. I think we are live. Well, good afternoon or good evening, everybody. My name is Patrick from the Poison Pen Bookstore, and we're here with another of our virtual events. And tonight we have Joanna Schaffhausen talking about her brand new book, Last Seen Alive. Did I pronounce the name right? I should have asked before we went live. Schaffhausen, great.
Yep, perfect.
And Joanna has signed a batch of books for us. And I'll put a link to that and PJ Tracy's brand new book, Desolation Canyon, which, as Barbara said, is getting killer reviews from all over the place. And Tracy has also signed a batch of books for us. I'll put links to both of these in the comments field should you wish to purchase a signed copy. And I'll also be monitoring that. So if you have questions for Tracy or Joanna, go ahead and put them in as they occur to you throughout the hour. Don't be shy. And Barbara will summon me back from the darkness towards the end of the hour to ask any questions you might have. So Barbara, over to you.
Thank you, Patrick. And you can always just pop up and surprise us. It's perfectly fine.
You may have to do that.
You have something to say. So here we are together again, ladies. What a treat. I'm just delighted to be talking to both of you. I follow both of your series, Joanna. This is it the fourth or the fifth base, the fifth book in the Ellery Hathaway series. And PJ, PJ, whether mom.
Tracy, either way.
Tracy, right. Wrote 10 in the wonderful Monkey Wrench series. I've never forgotten the experience of reading the first book. It was truly special, real groundbreaking kind of a book. Last year came back to life with a new book called Deep Into the Dark. And now she's written a sequel. And they are set in Los Angeles, or the lead detective is from the LAPD, Margaret Nolan. And, for those of you who can't figure out what to do between Michael Connelly's, here's your shot, you can read one of these. Whereas Joanna is giving us, I had an interesting conversation, Joanna, the other day with, I'm going to have a break. Well, here, wait, before we really get going, let me raise a glass to you. I think BYOB is the definite way to go.
I'm so sad. I only have water. Oh,
yeah, likewise.
Come on, we've done this often enough. You know that, BYOB is the name of it. So now it comes back to me, also from your publisher, Stacy. I took a drink there so my mind would reset, hoping it would reset. Stacy Willingham has written a debut, which has become a really big hit. It's been on the New York Times list already, which is unusual. It's called A Flicker in the Dark. But the point of the book is it's a serial killer novel, but it's not about the serial killer. It's about the family of the serial killer and what it would be like to be related to somebody accused or somebody, who has committed crimes like that. And I said to her that, it recalled to me when Gabby Giffords was shot down, outside the Safeway and so forth by that deranged person, that much of the questioning was not about him, but rather about his parents or his family. How are they going to cope with the fact that this guy had committed this very public and horrible crime. And I do think exploring not the serial killer, but the people affected by the serial killer is so important. And that is really the engine of your Ellery Hathaway books is, how she has survived being potential victim and actual, if not dead victim. And, what happens. So what got you interested in that, Joanne?
Gosh, I don't remember. The genesis for Ellery is more than 20 years ago, but she's loosely inspired by a real person from the Ted Bundy story, Carol Durant, who was 18 and shopping at a mall when Ted Bundy, posing as a cop, abducted her, and she was able to get away. But her life was completely altered by what happened. And even though that was more than 40 years ago now, we as a society keep hauling Carol back to tell the story again and again and again, because she was a linchpin in his narrative, because she was the beginning of his end and allowing the detectives to put together what was happening with all of the missing young women. So she's important if you're telling the story. And so every time it's told, which is a lot, this is the 5th book in my series. So over the past 5 years, there have been 22 new Ted Bundy movies or TV specials.
Wow.
Just in 5 years. And this is, again, more than, like, he was executed 33 years ago. And we just keep right on telling his story. And so poor Carol, like, he follows her around like a ghost, like whatever her life was going to be about. Now it's about Ted Bundy.
Wow.
And how you adjust to that, how you form an identity for yourself apart from that story, as you say, is kind of the animating force behind the books.
And how does she relate to the cop that, you know, worked her case and rescued her, so to speak? And then, you know, what kind of relationship is that? So, I mean, you're looking at the victim of a serial killer, where Stacy was looking at the child of a serial killer. But either way, their lives are irrevocably and irreparably altered, aren't they?
Yeah, when you get to somebody, I mean, Bundy is practically singular, but we are just as a society obsessed with serial killers. And Bundy went through like a wrecking ball across so many different lives and changed them, usually in bad ways, you know, sometimes permanently.
But, you know, one of the reasons I think that he is so fascinating is that he was a charismatic individual, and there's a certain glamour attached to him. It's hard to feel the same way about, you know, some of the other serial killers whose crimes were against different members of society, were far more grotesque. You know, do you think, I mean, I've always thought that Bundy got more attention because he, in a way, he was kind of a celebrity serial killer instead of a
I mean, he's the Hollywood version. If
Yeah.
if he hadn't existed, Hollywood would make him up. I mean, he escaped from custody twice. He was good looking. He was a law student, and this is more on the unfortunate side of why his story gets retold. He murdered young women who were mostly university students. So women who are viewed when they're white, his victims were exclusively white, generally pretty, and they had promise. They weren't, you know, street people. They weren't drug addicts.
Right.
So there was this real sense of loss that he was taking, you know, the girl next door. And I think that's another reason that the story gets retold, is because of who his victims were, not because of Bundy himself.
Right. They weren't throwaway members of society, that's for sure. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So remind me, PJ, when you guys wrote the Monkey Wrench series, it's been so long since I read them. Were serial killers? Surely in 10 books, you must have dealt with the serial killer at least once.
Yes, yeah, we did. But again, we never wanted to give, you know, front billing to a serial killer. You know, they're despicable. We never wanted to get in their head. And we really, really tried to stay away from that. But as you said, in 10 books, it's inevitable. You know, and it's, you know, the collective conscience is still, you know, as Joanna said, you know, obsessed with serial killers. So there's something about it that's fascinating. You know, and they are fascinating in a very gruesome, unthinkable, unimaginable way. So, but it's, you know, it was so distasteful, you know, it's so distasteful. So we tried to like kind of keep, you know, and Joanna does that very well. You know what happened, but you're not getting into this evil, warped, you know, twisted mind. So we just never wanted to write a book where people felt yucky after reading it, because you know, I've read plenty where I couldn't sleep because it was so repugnant and disturbing.
Right. So, Joanna, one of the things, I mean, I actually think that your FBI agent, Reid Markham, in many ways grips me as much as Ellery, because his life truly was also irrevocably altered. He's a fascinating character. Is there any basis for him in real life, or is he a wholly imagined character by you?
Well, again, most of the attributes of both Reid and Ellery and their relationship are completely invented out of whole cloth, but he's very loosely inspired by Bob Keppel, who was the Seattle homicide detective who had been on the job 1 week when he caught the Ted Bundy case. So imagine that, you're fresh on the job and your first case is Ted Bundy. So that completely changed the trajectory of Keppel's career. And he did not set out to specialize in serial murder, but that is what ended up happening. He went on to hunt the Green River killer, Gary Ridgway. When Bundy was eventually caught for the third time in Florida, Keppel was one of the people who flew to Florida to interview him, to try to get him to confess to all of the other crimes. So just the idea of being very new to the job and stumbling across a huge case is kind of the inspiration for Reid, but all of the specifics about being adopted into a rich white Virginia family with 3 older sisters and a divorce with an 8-year-old and all these other things. He loves to cook. He plays the piano. These are invented.
So also invented then is the relationship between Reid and Ellery. And you've had this dance back and forth through the books about whether they can have any kind of personal relationship, any kind of romantic relationship, given the circumstances that brought them together. And Ellery waxes hot and cold about it.
Yes, yeah, she's had mixed feelings, as do some readers. It's always interesting to read the commentary. I would say readers run about 90 to 95% in favor, but there is a small local minority that is like, ew, gross, no. The thing I think that squicks people the most is this idea that Reid and Ellery met when she was 14. But they met for like one night kind of thing. They had 2 quick conversations and that was it. And then he didn't see her again until she was like 28 years old. And by the time they have any kind of physical relationship, she's 30. So I feel like by the time you're 30, you're kind of allowed to make your own romantic choices. But whether she wants Reid to be that choice is in fact sort of left open-ended in some places in the series. Like she's not always sure, because their story always only goes back one place. As Reid's ex-wife says at one point, like, you can't date her. What are you going to say when people ask how you met?
Well, yes, I certainly see your point there. I don't know. It's interesting, at some point, if you intend to write more books about them, whether readers run out of patience with the dance. They either wanted to formalize one way or another. Either we're done here and we're going to go on and separately, or let's agree that there are obstacles in our way, but we are the people that matter most to each other, and we should forge some kind of a life together. So, and I think
I would counter that with 2 words, and they are Stephanie Plum.
Yes, there are 3 of them. But at the same time, do you, and no disrespect to Janet, do you actually want to write that kind of a series?
I mean, gosh, who wouldn't want to be Janet Ivanovich, right? To have that kind of beloved character in a long-running series on your hands. So in that sense, sure. I think if you have a long-running series like that, that part of the charm for readers is knowing what they're going to get, that you do tick the same boxes. The adventures are different every time, but you're going to get a lighthearted caper with lots of comedy, and there's probably going to be some sort of car mishap. Grandma's going to do something wacky, and Stephanie Plum is going to have a hard time deciding between Morelli and Ranger. And it's like ordering your favorite meal. at a restaurant. You know, you go in, you're like, ooh, that's what I'm in the mood for. And then it delivers and you feel really satisfied. So I do think there is some risk in moving away from what readers like about your books. So if she were to say, have Stephanie commit one way or the other, or say, you know what, I'm going to hang up this whole bounty hunter thing. Maybe I'll like open a dry cleaning business. Yeah, I think there is a danger in becoming too settled.
Okay, so
You had a long running series, Tracy. What do you
have
think
people
about
running
writing
90% versus 10?
Yeah.
You know, that's a different ball game. I agree with you that I think that Janet's fans prefer Stephanie to have a menu choice, but
Right.
I'm not sure that would work otherwise.
Well, there's always a danger too of writing a series when it's too long. I mean, there's a certain point where there's only so much conflict before you need some sort of resolution. And in Monkey Wrench, we had the same situation where people are like, "Our Grace Magotti, you know, I'm sick of this." You know, they're always, you know, it's a tug of war, you know, either do something or end it or whatever. So, you know, it's very difficult because, you know, in a series, you're dealing with characters, they're constantly arcing and they're evolving. You know, they're human beings that people become attached to, and they seem, you know, real to them. And so you can't, you know, portraying that realistically without doing the moonlighting thing, you know, and Bruce Willis and Sybil Shepherd get together and the series was over. So it just, you know, it's a very thin ice, you know, you're always delicately stepping, you know, finding your way, feeling your way, really.
Yeah.
No, I think that's an excellent point. I wasn't taking a position one way or another, but I just wonder how long you can continue the dance. And Janet has been particularly adept at it. You know, others, I think, sort of get driven to commit. Do you think? I mean, Stephanie, it's interesting that Stephanie is a woman. See, John D. McDonald was able to have a different woman in every book and nobody even blinked, right?
Right.
I think it's harder when it's
yeah,
a female.
and the time too.
Right. Yeah. A man is allowed to do that.
Yeah.
I don't think even today you could write a woman who's got like a different man every book.
But you know what? That's a great idea. Would probably be a wild success.
Well, you could be the first to write it. Why not? I love that. So anyway, we have Ellery and we have Reid, and you know, they are back together, and we still have Francis Coben, a serial killer, who, well, you what is the plot hinge of this novel, Joanna? Tell us. There's no reason for me to paraphrase it.
Yeah, you just sip your drink. I'll do the work. Yeah, no. So Coben is the killer that kidnapped Ellery when she was 14, and Reid, as the very new FBI agent, played the hunch and rescued her from the killer's closet. And that's always been the background to this series. Like it happened, you know, 14 years before we meet them. And Coben has kind of been hanging around over the series, but he's never been on screen or on the page before this. But he's been whiling his way and time away in prison on death row. And he's decided that he will give up the location to the bodies that have never been found if Reid will bring him Ellery. And he'll tell her. And that's kind of the impetus. And Reid and Ellery have broken up when this happened. So they have been not seeing each other, not been in contact. And so Coben is also forcing them back into each other's orbit again.
Excellent. Couldn't have said it better, even if I were sober. I love that. So, oh, come on. I barely touched this glass of wine. So, PJ, let's go back and let's talk about Margaret Nolan for people who were unfortunate enough not to have read Deep into the Dark, which you can now do in paperback form as well as hardcover form. Tell us about Margaret, because this is your new creation.
Yes, yeah, Margaret Nolan is an LAPD homicide detective, and she works for Homicide Special Section, which is a very elite kind of boys club in the LAPD, and they handle high profile, and she is just kind of finding her way. She has a supportive mentor as a partner, Al Crawford, but she has a lot of problems. Not problems, but she has a lot of things that she's dealing with. There are family things, finding her place in LAPD. There is, she has a romantic interest in Remy Boudreau that she's fighting constantly. And then she comes into contact with Sam Easton, who is, you know, a courageous Afghan war vet who is badly disfigured, almost killed in a roadside bombing, suffering from very severe PTSD. Now, Margaret's own brother was killed in Afghanistan. And, you know, at the beginning of the series, Sam Easton, the vet, suddenly becomes a suspect in a double murder that Maggie is investigating. So there's a lot of interesting conflict between Maggie and Sam. She empathizes with him. She understands in a way what, you know, he's been through, but she has to do her job. So that was really fun to play with. And that kind of continues on in Desolation Canyon. Sam Easton comes back and plays another prominent role, and their relationship kind of evolves. And at this point, you just never quite know, is it going to be Remy? Is it going to be Sam? And, you know, so that's sort of, you know, her backstory in a way. And so, you know, consequently, a very interesting character to write about and hopefully to read about. And, you know, part of the fun is that I never know what she's going to do. You know, it's just, she very much drives her character arc. So, you know, it's really a joy to write about her.
You had experience writing a different series, albeit with your mom, and creating characters. So, you know, Margaret is a fresh start for you, something you're doing on your own, but you had a pretty good backlog of experience. So,
yes, absolutely. I mean, PJ and I started writing together when I was a toddler, basically. And so we'd always written together. We wrote short stories together. We wrote Harlequin romances together. And that was just always been our career. And, you know, you're always polishing your craft and you know, developing new skills, and having a partner, you know, as a sounding board is just amazing. And she passed in 2016. And that was the moment where I'm like, you know, we had written 8 books together in the Monkey Wrench series. And it was like, oh, wow, you know, can I do this alone? Do I want to stay with this series alone? And I didn't know. And 2 weeks after she died, I didn't even think about it. It wasn't even a consideration. I just sat down one night in front of the computer and the words just came out. And I finished the first draft in 5 months, which, as you all know, never happens. It just never happens. It was so fast. So, you know, it was obviously a catharsis for me. And then during Tether to her, she's, you know, with me more so when I write than any other time, even though she's always with me. And I did a second one, and that was when I stepped back and said, I was starting to feel lonely writing Monkey Wrench because my buddy and my soulmate wasn't there. And I needed a recharge, the batteries. And having lived in Los Angeles for 10 years, I had amassed this, you know, vast warehouse of experiences and observations. And it was just, I had this irrepressible need to get it out on the page. And that's, you know, how Margaret and Sam came about.
it's wonderful that you were able to channel your grief in that particular way and stay in touch with your mom.
Right.
You know, we have a photo of the two of you together at the Poison Pen because we were lucky that you both came to see us. And I often look at it and think about what a wonderful relationship the two of you had, and, you know, in the books that you created. But wasn't she ill the entire time that we knew her?
Yes, pretty much. She had heart failure, and that's, you know, kind of a long-term progressive thing. So she became, you know, more and more ill as we went on, but you know, she was sharp as a tack, you know, up until the day she died, and we were still writing even at the worst of her sickness. So you know, we just had this, you know, I mean, it's a bond that I'll never have with anybody else. And, you know, I'm so proud of her and amazed at her strength and resilience that we did 4 grueling tours together when she was ill, and, you know, wrote 4 more books after that. And, you know, she was amazing. I mean, she is definitely an inspiration for me.
Maybe writing the books together, you know, kept her alive longer than it might have. You could look at it that way.
Well, I do believe that. I really do believe that. Definitely. It was always something to look forward to.
Right. So why don't you talk to each other? Joanna, what would you like to ask PJ, and then other way around here?
Well, I'd like to ask something keying off what you just said about Los Angeles. So I lived in Irvine for 4 years and spent a fair amount of time in Los Angeles. So it has a lot of different characteristics and a lot of different ways you could play it. So what sides of Los Angeles did you want to bring out in your series? How do you think about it as a character?
Well, you know, first and foremost, I didn't want LA to be just the gritty, dark underbelly of a big city, which is so often portrayed. I think that Los Angeles and California as a whole is one of the most complex cultures of any state. There's so many elements that, and just, you know, I just wanted to pull in all kinds of things, and not just, you know, Hollywood. I mean, Hollywood is like a minuscule part of it, that there are, you know, millions of real people who are, you know, trying to make a living, you know, in Los Angeles, and they can't afford to buy a house there. So they're apartment living and, you know, just trying to scratch by, and just to, you know, portray LA as a place where, you know, real regular people live, and sort of how they navigate that, and just also to bring out some of the interesting aspects of it in the history. You know, I mean, California, you know, is like LA, a place of transplants, you know, people from all over the place, and no one is from LA, but there's tons of people that are from LA or from California. You know, I know 5th and 6th generation Californians, and just their perspective on their state and the history of the state, you know, was really inspirational. And, you know, I want to dip into part of that too, because it's, you know, it's just fascinating.
Yeah, I think it comes out in the books, the different sides to the city, and the way it's embodied in your characters. That's one part that I really like about the books.
Oh, thank you. Well, of course, there's always a gritty underbelly, because there is, you know, I mean, it's like any huge city, there's always that. And he always needs some bad characters in a thriller series, right?
Of course.
Yes, definitely. But I had spoken, you know, a bit about Margaret's, you know, pending relationships and the romantic tension. And I wanted to ask you, about, I mean, you already definitely covered this, but you know, how it is that you approach you know, the fluctuating rhythm of Reid and Ellery, and if you just kind of let it evolve, you know, organically, or is that something that you put thought into before you approach a new book?
I mean, I plotted out sort of 5 books before I, you know, started the series, and what I wanted their character arcs to look like, and what I wanted their relationship with each other to look like. So I had a pretty good idea of what it was going to be going in. Some specifics, I wasn't sure like exactly how they would evolve, but I had the general feel for it. I wasn't sure how it was going to be received. And it's been gratifying to see the number of people who have been rooting for them.
Yes,
And
myself included. Yeah, it's really great. You know, I love your relationship developments. I mean, characters to me are so important. I mean, they're the core, they're the, you know, fountainhead of everything else in the book. And you've done, you know, a terrific job throughout the series.
So what about you? I know your readers, you know, I've looked at some of the reviews for your books, and people are sort of wondering, like, you know, you have these kind of two main characters, kind of like I do with Reid and Ellery and Sam and Maggie. And like, will they or won't they? Like, how are you approaching that? Do you know where that's going, or are you just sort of letting it see how it plays out?
I have no idea what's going to happen an hour from now. And it's funny that you're talking that you're a plotter and I'm a pantser. And, you know, I have to confess my ignorance, because last year I was asked if I was a plotter or a pantser. And I'm like, what on earth is a pantser? Well, for those of you as stupid as I was, a pantser is somebody who writes by the seat of their pants. And so that's totally me. You know, I mean, you very definitely, you know, it's a more organic process. So I don't really know. You know, for instance, I'm writing the third book in the series right now, and I had some choices to make, and I thought, well, I'm going to go this way. And then one morning I come downstairs, I'm like, oh no, I have to go this way. So I'm just kind of figuring, I'm on page 300. I'm still figuring things out. So it keeps my life exciting, you know?
Yeah. I'm a hybrid. I know some things, but not others.
Yeah. Well, isn't that part of the fun though, right? I mean, it's just, you know, when you get surprised. I mean, you know, obviously you have to have, you know, some concept of, you know, certain directions, but then, you know, allowing yourself the freedom to be able to just say, hey, let them do what they want and see what happens. And if it doesn't work, backtrack and fix it in the mix, you know.
Reid got shot once in one of the books, and I didn't see that coming.
Oh, yeah, really?
Sorry, Reid.
See, that's so much fun. I love that. When you're like, what happened? What did I do?
Wow, that is exciting. So, PJ, I do have a question, which is part of, you know, some of the book takes place at the Hotel Bel Air, which
yes.
I have to tell you, when I was a child and a teenager, I spent a lot of time there. And
you did? Do tell.
Well, my father was in the telephone industry, and he's one of the presidents of General Telephone and helped put the company together. And a lot of it was in California, but we lived in Chicago. So he would take us on these wonderful long driving trips all across the United States. And we're talking the 1950s here. But, you know, because I was young, I was clueless about the Hotel Bel Air. And he had a lot of dinners there for, you know, executives and other stuff. Nor did I appreciate the, you know, the Marmont, the Chateau next door. But the Hotel Bel Air had, at least then, I haven't been there for a long time, these amazing gardens. I mean, they were like magical gardens, you know, like you'd find in a British novel or something, you know, with fairies in the bottom of the garden, and you would go there and slots and the whole bit. And my younger sister and I would get really bored by these long adult dinners, so they would send us out to play in the garden. And that was absolutely wonderful. Actually, my favorite memory of the Hotel Bel Air was one night at some large dinner, and my dad had a vice president with him. And this was before credit cards, when people actually paid for business dinners in cash, real cash, you know, that we had some new, I don't know if he was the captain or the metro or whatever. Anyway, he was in charge of this large dinner, and there were probably at least 12, maybe 20 people there. I really can't remember because I was fairly young. But anyway, the dinner went on and the whole bit, and eventually the check was brought. And my dad, you know, motioned to his vice president, you know, who came up and, you know, looked at the bill and put away the piled cash on the plate or whatever it was. And after a while, the guy came back, and it turned out that he had Scotch taped what he thought was an adequate tip to the silver salver. And my father, who went to pick up the money, and recognized what had happened. And he looked at this guy and he picked up the plate and he unpeeled the tape and he took all of the money and he put it back in his pocket. And he said, if I am able to eat here, he said, I'm able to work out the tip. And then he got up and walked out.
Oh my
He was
gosh.
a great guy, my dad. He was also an ex All-American. He was a really big man.
Oh,
And,
really?
you know, nobody really wanted to mess with him. But I've always remembered that, you know, it was such an interesting miscalculation on the part of the staff at the Hotel Bel Air.
Right.
But, you know, but also I love the fact that my dad was not intimidated by the fact that he had a number of, you know, important people there. And it was a place that he liked to entertain, but he was not going to put up with basically being dissed, you know.
Right.
By
Insubordinate.
Right. So anyway, I was fascinated by the Hotel Bel Air, but my real question was, you know, can you write about Los Angeles without touching upon some famous people? Because you do have a number of recognizable figures in your book.
Yeah, well, you just can't, especially if you're in a place where celebrities hang out. And the thing about LA, I lived in Santa Monica, and which is the west side, right on the ocean. And you literally cannot spend a day in LA or go anywhere in LA without encountering at least one, if not two, 410 incredibly famous, recognizable people. And the interesting thing, it's like nothing, you know, it's like, so, oh, there's Al Pacino, there's blah, 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 and sitting next to, you know, Robert De Niro or, you know, Kevin Costner. And it's just so normal. And nobody, it's part of life. You know, you're not fazed by it. You can sit and have a conversation with them because you're not like, you know, it's where it's like, oh my God, there's somebody else. So I always thought it was a really interesting rhythm of the city that I don't think a lot of people know about if they don't live there for a long time, is that, you know, it's just like in LA, they're regular people. You know, they go to the Coffee Bean and Tea Leaf, or, you know, they can sit next to them at the Bel Air or restaurant, and it's like no big deal. So, you know, it was good. So yeah, definitely. And in this third book I'm writing, ultimately, of course, you have to go back and get Celebrity Scandal in, which I hadn't done in the first two. And I thought, you know what, why not? It's fun. They happen. So explore that, because I really hadn't gotten into the Hollywood aspect of LA in the first two books.
Does that intimidate, do you think, the LAPD, or if you were a law enforcement officer and you're dealing with, you know, some celebrity, would that, surely that would change the dynamic to some degree, or did the cops there have to get used to it?
Well, I think, you know, and I knew several LAPD officers and still do, they're good friends. And it was funny because I did ask them about that. And, you know, initially they said, yes, you know, it's intimidating, and, you know, if bad things happen, they felt like they had to treat them differently. But once they get used to it, and it happens, you know, if you are, you know, stumbling over stars every day, you know, in regular life and in your job, they get used to it. But yeah, definitely. I think, you know, initially it's very intimidating, and things are handled differently, you know, at first, early in career.
But it's just part of the fabric of the city, you know, even if Hollywood's the less percent. So, Joanna, why did you decide that Ellery would become, after her hideous experiences and so forth, why did she become a police detective?
Well, she wants to like crusade for justice, basically. She roots for victims. I think there was probably an element of desiring to keep herself safe or safer, you know, to have the gun and the defense training, to be on the lookout for bad guys before they can spot you, kind of thing, and to give back. I mean, Ellery has a lot of survivor's guilt because there were 16 young women who were known, and then some others suspected, who died before her.
Right.
And, you know, why did she live? I mean, this is, again, the loose inspiration for Ellery is Carol Durant, who was abducted by Ted Bundy, and she was able to escape him. And he just drove up the road and abducted a different girl who was 17, and her name was Debbie Kent. And Debbie didn't get away. She died. So you can imagine if you're one of the people who survives a mass murderer like that, you're like, well, why me? Why am I still here? And so Ellery is forced to confront that head on in this book, because here's Coben saying, okay, well, if you come see me, I will, you know, give relief to these families who have been wondering what happened to their sisters and daughters. And Ellery's the one, if she says no, then they don't learn the truth.
Right.
And so there's this pressure for everything they've already lost, you know, at least give us this. And you can imagine why Ellery, you know, feels like she has to go through with it.
And yeah, you did good. Oh, I'm sorry, Barbara.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say that the way you handle the survivor's guilt, you know, is very, you know, it's dead on. It's very authentic to me.
Well, thank you.
Did Bundy ever give any explanation, you know, why he chose this particular population to go after? I mean, he could have, you know, serial killers do they generally tend to kill the same kind of people, or do, you know, or are they just like all over the place? I don't know enough about it.
It varies a lot. There's no usual serial killer. And in fact, efforts to classify them, like with Mindhunter and all that whole thing, like the project kind of fell apart, where they're like, oh, they're organized, or they're disorganized, or, you know, oh, they're all white. Oh, I'm sorry, my basset hound is here with a squeaky toy.
I thought it was a baby.
Squeaky toys.
Oh, that's what it was.
I have a puppy who's over here beating at the door who wants to come in. So
and I have a cat clawing the walls. I don't know why.
Yeah. Let him in.
Well, he's right here clawing the walls.
He's like, oh, it's squeaky time. He's going away now. That's good. Anyway, what was I saying? Oh, serial killers. Yeah. So, I mean, no. I mean, and Bundy, he varied. I would say most of his victims were in the 17 to 23-year-old sort of college age, long dark hair parted in the middle, which resembled his college girlfriend, a woman named Stephanie, who had turned him down, like when, you know, that he thought they were going to get married, and she dumped him, and he was really furious. And so he had this idea of the kind of man that she wanted, somebody who was better educated, more debonair, more urbane, better dresser, and more ambitious. And he like molded himself into what he thought she wanted, wooed her back. And the minute she was like, okay, he's going to propose, he dumped her.
The whole thing was a revenge scenario?
It was a revenge thing, yeah. But the thing is, here's the thing though, like if you read the Bundy stories, everybody wants to say, well, this is why he became a serial killer. And I'm sorry, if getting dumped in college made you a serial killer, we would just have bodies from one end of this country to the other. Like, this does not explain where he came from. And in Bundy's case, and in a lot of the cases of serial killers, it's clear they were on some other path from the time they were children. Like, you can go back and see the signs. They were born this way, or they were born with a proclivity that then they grew up in some circumstances in terrible abusive situations that helped turn them into the people they became. But there were screws loose to begin with. Bundy's aunt, when he was a boy, still a child, 8, 10, something like that, was spending the night at the house. She staying there, she decided to take a nap. And when she woke up, Bundy had taken all of the knives in the house and put them around her body as she slept with the pointed tip facing her.
Yuck.
Yeah, so like, but he's like a kid at this point. Like, it's clear, the same thing with Dahmer. He talked about like wanting to get inside animals and see their insides and how they worked. Like they were thinking these thoughts when they were very, very young. Why this happens, where these people come from, is still is a big mystery. We don't know. We can't say, oh, it's this gene or this kind of environment or whatever. And I think that is one reason we as a society are still drawn to these stories, is that there's the mystery of, ooh, are we going to catch the serial killer? But there is a deeper mystery of, where does the serial killer come from? Like,
that's such an interesting point you raise about the gene and all. I mean, if you think about CRISPR techniques and so forth, if they can go in and splice genes to get rid of spina bifida or Tay-Sachs disease or something, I wonder if they'd ever be able to really find, like the rogue animal gene, because there are, there are killers in the animal kingdom, and you have to wonder if someday that might be something in utero, that can be tested for and eliminate. Well, on another question, we talked about Los Angeles. Talk to us about Boston. Isn't that the general habitat of Ellery?
There a bunch of the books take place in Boston, and a small part of Last Seen Alive takes place in Boston. The series kind of goes wherever the stories go. Coben's on death row in Terre Haute, so a bunch of when Ellery goes to see him, the story sort of transfers there. Boston's a small city that thinks it's big, it's got a lot of attitude packed into it's like 20 square miles, and people are on top of one another. And this means rich neighborhoods and poor neighborhoods are often right up against one another. And I find that's one aspect that's really interesting. And of course, it has a lot of really rich, deep history that's fun to explore. But I find the people really fascinating. We have, again, all kinds of cultures here. There were like 40 languages, counting dialects, spoken at my high school.
Wow.
It was crazy. So you can find just about any kind of person, but it's the dichotomy I think is really interesting. There's a 7-Eleven mentioned in one of the books that is a real 7-Eleven, and it exists right on the edge of all of like MIT and the drug companies, the very, very wealthy drug companies that have all of their offices around there, and the MIT buildings, and then the projects. Like they're literally, it's like one street over, and the 7-Eleven sits right at the juncture. And so you can go into the 7-Eleven and like, it might be a limo pulling up outside and like some big fancy CEO gets out and goes in, or it might be like, I saw two sex workers fighting over a cell phone once in the store. One guy was like completely orange and buying wine at like 8:30 in the morning. Another time it was like a male modeling agency had dropped by. Like you just never knew what you were going to find in this one particular 7-Eleven because of exactly where it was located. And Boston is full of these very particular spots. And I think that's kind of one of the fun things about writing it.
Well, it is. I mean, it's a walkable city even, it's not, as you say, large geographical. It has a tremendous, intellectual component, great universities. It's got the tech, very heavy in tech and so forth. But I've always thought of Boston, at least old Boston, as having very ethnic neighborhoods. I mean, you had, a concentration of, you had the Irish, you had the whatever it is, and they all were kind of wedged in, as you say, together.
Yeah,
that probably has changed.
Yeah, it's more of a melting pot now. Those areas still exist.
Yeah.
And there are, influx of new communities, like Ethiopian or Vietnamese. So it's not just the Irish and the Italians.
Not anymore, no. But if Ellery's the cop there, there's just like, both of you have chosen to have policewomen that are in amazing cities, where there's never going to be any dearth of interesting cases, or, there's going to be a huge population of victims and huge population of predators and criminals and so forth. So, it's fascinating. Why don't we call Patrick up and see if there are questions from the audience, or Patrick may want to ask questions of his own, because Boston's kind of a stalking ground for Patrick now and then.
What, Boston is?
Sure. You like authors from Boston?
Well, that's true. I do. Yeah. And also fascinated with the whole serial killer. I'm a true crime fan, I must admit. And there have been, as you say, there have been any number of, really good true crime documentary series that have come out, about Bundy in particular. And, one of the things that really struck me about Bundy and that whole era was, like the traveling serial killer of the 1970s, 1980s, and how, back then it was just easy for him to just cross state lines, or, move across the country. And they had a much harder time tracking him than they would today. I thought that was really interesting.
And the technology too is like, so, now it's really hard to get lost. I mean, the cell phones and the GPS and all that stuff. One quick thing I have to say, just quick circle back to the serial killer, is that I had recently read this great academic paper on it was kind of the nature versus nurture and the origin of, and how, nobody really knows. But the one line that really struck me was that basically not all sociopaths become serial killers, and not all serial killers are sociopaths. And I thought, wow, not only is that correct, but very interesting.
Yeah, sociopathy is actually pretty common, maybe as high as 1 in 25 people.
Right.
And serial killers are much, much rarer.
Thank God.
Yes, thank goodness.
It's funny how some of them have these crossover traits, the narcissist, let me see here. Oh, well, Sue Street says, since I live in Milwaukee, it's sad to me that a group was doing a Jeffrey Dahmer tour at one point.
No.
Oh, Pat comes in for the win with her comment. Some of them are CEOs, she says. Yes, indeed. And politicians, of course.
We're seeing a lot of sociopaths in elected offices. I don't think there's any question about that.
Yep,
Right.
I think that's true.
Maureen says, okay, so why the Chi Omega rampage? Was that an escalation? Also, didn't he blame his mom and pornography?
He definitely is Bundy. And I mean, Bundy was, he was decompensating and becoming more erratic. So the Chi Omega murders were near the end of his rampage. After he escaped from custody the second time, he went to Florida and he broke in and attacked a bunch of women in Chi Omega. Yes, I mean, Bundy blamed pornography. That's another good one. Again, if pornography made you a serial killer, we'd have even more bodies than getting dumped in college. Like
nobody would be alive.
Nobody.
There'd be like 5 people.
And who would want to be around them, right?
Yeah, exactly. Like, I mean, Bundy was saying whatever. By the time he was on death row, he was saying whatever he thought would, 1, get him attention, and 2, keep him alive. So he
and
was
that whole farce about him, representing himself in court.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Now, I have a personal story about Jeffrey Dahmer.
Oh my.
Oh, I'm sad to hear that.
Oh.
I know, right? Well, it's not quite that bad. Well, we had a home in Aspen for 10 years. And as you know, and maybe some people don't, Pitkin County Jail, Aspen, Colorado, was one of the places he escaped from. Right. So our house was, Conundrum Creek, and we had a pond in the back. And it was kind of in a shallow by a river, but there was a big hill, kind of a cliff. And so we'd go out in the backyard, and the first thing you'd see is you'd look up a cliff and you'd see this cabin. that was the Bundy cabin where he spent the nights
Ooh.
Yeah.
in our backyard.
Ooh.
Wait, Bundy or Dahmer?
I'm sorry, Bundy. Sorry. My head was back in Milwaukee. No, Ted Bundy.
I've been talking about him for so many years that in one way or another, the story surrounding him, that I've had all kinds of people tell me their weird, like coincidental stories about Bundy. I talked to one woman who had been at Chi Omega and she was just away for the weekend. So she wasn't there.
Oh my
When
gosh.
it happened. And another guy whose name was Ted, and he just happened to drive a VW Bug. And it was when Ted was loose in Colorado, and he was just walking along the street one day, and out of nowhere come all these men with guns, and they're like, get down. And he's like,
wow.
And then they're like, oh, wrong Ted, sorry, bye. But
Close.
yeah, he had quite a moment. But yeah, you never know who's got like what kind of Ted connection.
Right, the Ted connection.
Across so many
Ted
states.
connection. I love that. We had Ann Rule at the store one time, and she did tell her own, Ted Bundy experience. Of course, writing about it launched an amazing career for her.
Right.
So, but you were there, Patrick, weren't you?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the killer inside
stranger beside me.
Right. Yeah, stranger beside me,
You
whatever.
know who else is really terrifying is the dating game killer guy.
Oh.
Oh my God.
Well, do we have any actual questions from the audience?
Let's see. Yay. What do we have here? Oh, okay. Our friend Paula Meunier, the writer. She says, how do you decompress from writing these dark stories?
Good
Alcohol.
question.
Alcohol, yeah, right. Go and take it, Joanna.
Gosh. Well, they don't scare me, I guess, is the thing. Like I go to sleep with Forensic Files most nights. So, I mean, the kinds of things that most of the things that I write about are not the things that frighten me. Like serial killers they were always rare, and now they're even more rare. There are very few of them that are active these days. So your odds of actually coming in contact with one, pretty minimal. I don't like crimes against children, like on the page. Parents especially murdering their children. I find that upsetting because it's such a violation of the bond. So those stories, when it's done in detail and they're like showing you the terrified child, like I nope out of there.
Yeah.
Those stories especially where they dwell on the child's pain, I'm not down for that. But other than that, I don't really have a hard time. Like US politics scares me more than
yeah, right.
Like that keeps me up at night.
Yeah. Well, oh, I'm sorry. No, me too. I have the same thing. It doesn't, I don't ever get deep enough into that horrible headspace that affects me. So I sleep well at night. But I don't know if this is the same for you, Joanna, but when I finish a book, it's for a year, it's your life. You're in there, your characters. I mean, they're with you all the time. You're not even safe when you sleep because they come to you in your dreams. And then the first thing you wake up seeing or experiencing, and for better, for worse, whatever. But whenever I finish a novel, I have about 5 days where I fall into this deep depression. I'm like, what purpose do I have in life? Why am I here? My life is over. What am I going to do? Then I have all this spare time, and then, and there is alcohol involved too. But after 5 days, I'm like, oh, wow, I can go out and, garden, or wow, I can actually go grocery shopping for myself. And then I realized, do you get in that funk after a book?
No, but I definitely find like writing is enervating in some ways. Like, I talk to people about, like, you have to summon an entire world out of nothing.
Right.
Hold it in your head. And it takes a lot of energy to do that. And for me, at least, like, it can pop really quickly. So during the pandemic, when like my kid was here and the dog was home, he wasn't in daycare, my husband's here. And like every 5 minutes, somebody's wandering into the room to be like, hey, I have a question, or woo, squeaky toy. And it would be like a soap bubble bursting where I'm like, oh, and I have to like make everything go away, get everybody what they needed, squeaky toy, whatever, and then like try to summon it back up again. And it's like,
so I think a lot of people have had a hard time dealing with,
there's so many
together during this and trying to find any private space. I'm really lucky to have a big house that I can divide in half. My husband gets one half, I get the other, and we meet in the kitchen.
And I live alone, so I don't answer to anybody. It's funny, Joanna, when you were saying that about, you have this world, this bubble, and I feel exactly the same way. And very often, especially if I get distracted, I have this image that's just indelible in my mind of the cats in Men in Black that has the universe on the charm on its collar, that entire miniature universe, the collar. That's kind of what I feel like I'm a cat with the universe in the collar, and somebody comes up and distracts me and the phone rings. I'm like, cool, there goes the universe and all the inhabitants.
Sounds almost like a postpartum depression. Once the book, you give birth to the book.
Exactly. Yeah, right. Very good point. Exactly.
Yeah.
And it comes back. I love it. I am under attack by my animals because they're pretty soon going to make it right through the wooden door that I have closed them out. So I'm probably going to have to go. If you guys want to continue, please do. But I think at this stage, I've got to sign off before I'm eaten alive. Let me remind you before I depart anyway, that both Joanna and PJ have signed their marvelous new books for us. And Joanna, if I'm not totally mistaken, didn't we talk about a standalone book a couple of Zooms back?
Yeah.
Haven't you written a book that wasn't an Ellery?
But the standalone became the Annalisa Vega series. So
okay.
So no standalone yet.
No standalone yet. Oh, well.
Yeah, Deep Into the Dark was supposed to be standalone. No standalone yet for me either.
Well, there's when you guys create such fascinating characters, it's almost inevitable that you would keep writing about them. I think, and as you say, you've created this whole world and there's so much more to explore. But, we talk to, every author has a different story. We talk to people who can't imagine writing any kind of continuing character. And then we talk to people who, who love doing it and don't really want to write standalones. So there's no right answer to any of it.
There isn't? It's all personal.
There really isn't. Anyway, what a joy to see you both again. So I'm going to leave you with Patrick, who may have many more questions, at least one probably about music. And I'm going to go and feed the puppies. So thank you guys.
Thank you, Barbara. It was so great to see you again.
Always a pleasure.
Yeah.
Bye.
Take care. Bye.
All right. Now the real fun begins.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
No, I'm just kidding. As far as questions go, there are a few that have come in. You've already talked about this, Joanna, but Debbie wants to know, moving forward, will your next books be about serial killers?
So for me, no. My next book is the Annalisa sequel. Gone for Good came out last August. The next one is Long Gone. It comes out this August, and it's about Annalisa is called to the scene of a very strange homicide. A cop is shot to death in his own home, in his bed, and his much younger wife is strangely unharmed. And he has this crazy story about how a guy in complete diving gear came in and did the deed and then went like flip-flopping out again. So Annalisa has to figure out, did this guy in the diving suit ever exist? And if so, who could it have been? And when she turns up the prime suspect, it turns out her best friend is dating him.
Oh,
nice.
So
I love that's like the one-armed man, in The Fugitive.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
Is he real? Yeah.
I don't want to talk too much about this because it's the next book, but it's, again, loosely inspired by a true story.
Oh, wow.
What about you, Tracy? What are you working on now?
I am working on the third book in this current series, so it's very fun. And I was speaking earlier about because they're set in LA, and I haven't explored the very unavoidable aspect of the Hollywood celebrity scene yet, which you have to if you're writing about LA. So I'm having fun kind of getting into a little bit of dark, grisly celebrity scandal.
Awesome. There's always been this weird kind of occult underbelly in LA, that you can feel. It's always been such a fascinating place.
It really is. I mean, it's so complex, and there's so many aspects, so many facets. So it's really fun. I mean, you can take one place like Magic Castle, which is a trip in LA, and it's like that is like an entire universe. I mean, it's the magic, and yeah, it's fun. I mean, just there are a million things. So,
A lot of stories.
What about getting the law enforcement details right? Do you both have people that you can check in with for accuracy and those kind of details?
Yeah, absolutely. I always have had several, whatever part of a book, even if it was Monkey Wrench or whatever, I know tons of cops and lawyers and computer geeks and everything. And I think that's so important because although I don't like to get into great detail, you have to be authentic, and you owe it to the people that do this for a living and work so hard and risk their lives to get it right. So, that's important, very important to me.
What about you, Joanna? Do you have some?
I would take a slightly contrarian view, which again, yes, I try to get right what I can, and I have people I can talk to, but like, I don't let the details get in the way of the story. The story comes first. And I think when you're writing a police procedural, there's almost certainly going to be stuff that you have to condense. Like I attended a really fascinating meeting for Sisters in Crime at one point where they had a law enforcement person come in, and he did like 20 minutes on jurisdiction. Sitting there, it was totally fascinating. And like, I personally was riveted in the back of my head of going, readers do not care.
No,
they do not care. He's like, you have to get it right about whose territory this would be. And it's like, no, because the readers, most of them don't know, and they do not care. Like, they care if there's conflict, and you want to write that into a story about like, well, who's going to investigate this death? And if there's like one agency fighting with another, and there's two people in this agency who are at conflict, and you can make that part of your story, then the reader might care. But procedurally, nope, they don't care. They care about
they don't care.
You don't want to say, Ellery spent the next 4 hours doing paperwork.
Right, exactly. It's funny, PJ and I always had a term for that. I mean, it was our inside joke. Nobody knew what on earth we were talking about, but it's like, we don't want to see somebody put the hairbrush on the dresser. So whenever one of us would get too wound up and get a little too detailed about like this and everything that happens and how they're speaking and where they're going, and we just look at the hairbrush on the dresser, and we do to like, it's like a cut. Yeah,
there are a lot of, I'm sure you both have read these kind of books where it reads like you're watching a TV show.
Yeah, right.
Everything. It's like, all right.
Yeah.
Yeah. They got.
I want action. Give me the action.
Well, let's see here. Anybody else? Maureen says some of my favorite mystery writers are from Minnesota, or have their books set there. Is it something in the food, the lutefisk?
The lutefisk. We're all poisoned by fish jello, soaked in lye. Oh my God. No, well, it's funny. Minnesota is very interesting too, because there are so many, it's also a complex place in a different way. You have got so many different nationalities, and you have, you know, regional characteristics. It's a huge state. You have urban areas and rural areas. You have farming areas. You have the Iron Range and mining, and you have the Lake Superior and all that jazz. So it's fun, but I think, you know, a huge part of it is the weather. Cause like I woke up this morning and it was 16 below zero temperature, air temp. So what the heck are you gonna do? You're not going outside, so you might as well race, you know, and that weather is so depressing that I think we all get real dark cider during the winter. And it's like, well, gotta have fun somehow, you know, and we're not gonna go ice fish and get drunk. So what? Kill people, you know,
16 below in the Twin Cities?
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
so tell me, you know, since we're both Replacements fans and we're going after hours anyway, what are the Skyways?
Oh, the Skyways are actually a brilliant invention because it is so cold. And, you know, people who walk to places, you know, there's not parking next to the high rise where you work in Minneapolis, right? There are X amount of parking ramps and you've got to walk 2, 3, 5, 10 blocks to where you work. And it's regularly sub-zero for highs during the day in like January and sometimes February. So they built these above enclosed heated above street bridges. And it connects almost every single building in downtown Minneapolis, which is not small. I mean, it's a small city, but you know, probably the Skyway system probably goes for miles. So you can park in one place and get out, and you can walk 15 blocks to your office, all inside.
So there must be crimes that take place in the Skyway, right?
There are crimes, but you know, not a ton of them, because there's always a security and police presence, because it seems like, you know, if you're at a game at Target Center and then it's late at night and you get in the Skyway to go into the parking ramp at like 11:30 or after a concert of First Avenue, you know, for instance, you know, it's not good. So there are things, but I mean, there's a lot of security, so.
Yeah. We digress.
Right.
Well, guys, it's been a great fun talking with you.
You too,
And,
Patrick. Love to see you.
Yeah. And congratulations, both of you, on your new
Thanks.
books here. And we hope to see you both again out here in the desert in the flesh. At some
Yes,
point.
Great.
definitely. Absolutely. Can't wait. Next year, fingers crossed, right?
No kidding. No kidding.
Yeah. And maybe see you at BoucherCon in Minneapolis this August.
Is that this year?
Yes. Or September. Right?
Really? I've never
Yeah.
been to Minneapolis, so.
Oh, Patrick, I'll show you a good time.
Ah, you heard
And
it
I'm
here first,
hosting-
folks.
I'm hosting the live auctions. It'll be fun.
That would be a blast.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to do that. I
Okay,
don't know about
good.
BoucherCon, but
Yeah, right. Well, just coming to visit me. You know how to reach me.
all right. Sounds good. Well, you guys have a great night, and we will be talking to you soon. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in tonight.
Yeah.